Welcome to the HR Huddle podcast, presented by Sapient Insights Group, the ultimate resource for all things HR. It's time to get in the huddle.
Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the HR Huddle. I'm your host, Teri Zipper, CEO and Managing Partner at Sapient Insights Group. And I'm back for another exciting episode of HR We Have a Problem. This is the show where we break down the big and most relevant HR issues of the day. We help you make sense of what they mean for you, and we talk about what you might do about them. Joining me today is Christine Albert. Christine is the founder of Adam Street Consulting. She's formerly the CXO, the Chief Experience Officer at LCMC Health in New Orleans. She's also on the board of the American Hospital Association. So she's got a lot going on. I first met Christine on a project that I worked on with her and her team. Welcome, Christine. I'm super excited to have you on the show.
Thanks, Teri. Happy to be here.
How are things in New Orleans? I feel like it's been a while now since I've been down there, but I really enjoyed my time in the area.
You know, spring in New Orleans is the best time to be here. It's like a perfect 75 and sunny, and it's our festival season, and there is a festival for any and everything. So it's just kind of one of those reminders of why we choose to live here. It's that connection to kind of creativity and culture and food.
Yeah, I love it. I hadn't been there in years. And when I got back down there, I was like, now I know why I like this place.
It's so fun. I think I just saw Rick Steves just voted or said that in his opinion, New Orleans is the most fun city in the United States. So it's not just you and I that think this.
Oh, wow. That's
official.
Cool. Yeah, it's official. Well, we're gearing up here for the Kentucky Derby. So Louisville tends to be an exciting place in May.
Oh, that sounds incredible. Do you have your hat ready?
I do. I do have my hat. I am super excited. I haven't been in years, and this is the 150th running. So incredible. I cannot wait to go. So I know you happened to catch my recent podcast of where I interviewed the CMO of iSolved, and we were talking about how to bring marketing and HR closer together. I think I even mentioned some things that we had done at LCMC that I thought would really resonate with people. I was actually excited to know somebody listens to the podcast, so thank you. But this kind of led to you reaching out and saying, "Hey, let's go deeper on this topic." And I was actually thrilled about that because I did see a lot of this at my time there working with you guys. So anyway, I thought that's what we would do today, is go a little deeper on this idea of the customer and employee experience and how to make that better. Does that sound like a good plan to you?
Yes, this is one of my favorite topics. I'm excited.
Awesome. Then let's get into the huddle. So over your tenure, you'd been in an executive level marketing and comms role for a while. How did you end up with HR? I mean, this whole chief experience officer is very nascent role still at this point. A lot of organizations haven't really figured out how to fully define it. How did this come up at LCMC? Was it opportunistic? Was it something that you guys really thought a lot about and built into? Or, tell me a little bit about that. I'm just very curious.
Mm-hmm. No, that's a good point too, about the, that CXO role being kind of a nascent role. And also my discovery or my finding is that when I talk to peers and colleagues, kind of each organization, even though the title may be the same, the scope, the portfolio, kind of the purpose for that role, there can be some common threads, but oftentimes how it comes to life is really different or distinct to the organization. So in the case of LCMC Health, it really was opportunistic. We are now a 8-hospital system, a dual academic system based in New Orleans, about 14,000 people. And I was lucky enough to join the system actually before it became a system. So I've been there as a single individual hospital up into where it's grown to the present day, which has been incredible. But in many ways, it's almost like being an entrepreneur. So it's a large organization, but just this constant change and growth and acceleration. And so, as you mentioned, I started really in a Marcom leadership role, built up that function that didn't exist previously at a system level. And part of that was creating a brand or a cohesive brand strategy for our system, which previously had been a portfolio approach of a variety of hospitals with different mission, vision, values, verbal and visual identities. So New Orleans is a pretty small market. Our hospitals were located within 8 miles of one another. And just from a kind of a logo perspective, kind of at the most surface level of brand, I think we had about 580 different variations of visual identities in the market. So we really were lacking both the crispness and the clarity, like, here's who we are, here's what we stand for, and here's what we do. And so that brand work took about 3 years. And then once we launched, it really delivered a lot of business results in terms of kind of the top of the funnel. People actually knew us. So
Yeah.
awareness leading to preference, which then converted to business, to the bottom line. So after that successful kind of brand process, which was really emotional for a lot of the organization as well as intellectual, just that the change management component, along with the creation of something new without loss of individual identity. The CEO of the system said, I really like that so much. Perseverance, persistence, great strategy, delivered results. I'd love for that kind of effort to go into the people side of the business. So I want us to be known for our culture and our brand, because those are two distinct things that we can kind of lean in and own and do differently or uniquely. And so it was kind of like, whatever you did there, can you kind of transfer that kind of thinking and approach to learning and development initially, followed by recruitment, then HR operations and well-being. So it just kind of evolved that way over about 3 years, but just kind of the rate of change and the growth of the system really necessitated that. And then kind of the tech stack sitting behind it helped to accelerate that. In our case, that was an ERP implementation with Workday, which is how we met.
Yep, exactly. How did you, so it kind of evolved, which is good because sometimes those things just as they happen over time, people learn more, understand it more. I'm curious though, because one of the things I read a Deloitte article recently about what some of the challenges were for the CXO. And one of them was just that the role was not really well socialized within the organization. Did you ever feel like people just didn't understand what you were trying to accomplish with bringing these two things together? Just didn't understand the idea of the experience?
Yes, I'd say defining it and creating understanding, and then buy-in and support and advocacy for the organization, for the teams which I manage, those 5 umbrella teams, as well as for executive peers. So to me, the beauty was it wasn't defined. You get to write your playbook, the job description, the strategic plan, the vision for this function. At the same time, it isn't just kind of a clear cut, you're an HR generalist, you do X, Y, Z every single day, for example. So I think the first part of that was even for the teams themselves, bringing them together to say, as a team, as a group, kind of this experienced team, what are we trying to do together? What do we stand for? How do we anchor to an employee experience in this case that is based on our brand and our mission, vision, values, but also brings to life kind of differentiation, who we are as an organization that's distinct and really create something compelling. So that process in itself, before you could even kind of begin to do the work to define it, was a really important step.
Yeah. Did you actually reorganize the team? So you literally had marketing rolling up to you and HR rolling up to you in this role. And so it was all of a sudden you've got these sort of super creative people working with these very analytical individuals. How did you, I don't know, organize these two teams or think about, and there's probably more than that, but I'm just thinking about those two major players in this, talk a little bit about how you kind of operationalized that and brought these groups together.
Mm-hmm. That's a great question. And actually, when I started to lead this group, I was asking the same question of myself. And I thought, let me go ask and talk to peers and colleagues that I know, and then ask them if they knew anybody who's doing something similar. So I kind of had this great colleague conversation going for probably 5 months off and on. And I spoke to maybe 40 something people who are CHROs or CXOs or CMOs. And each conversation was as different as the person, which is, we haven't figured it out. We've done this, but I'm not sure I'd love it. We've tried this before. Here's my org chart. Let me know what you do and how it goes, and gets back to me, get back to me really excited or interested in what you're doing. So the lesson was there, like nobody had a magic wand or structure or process. So that was both reassuring and also at the same time, it's like, okay, it's a blank slate. So we kind of deconstructed actually the HR function a little bit. And so it became HR operations, recruitment, the learning and development piece, and well-being. So rather than all of those things rolling up through HR, kind of put them side by side so that those leaders became colleagues working together. And then we're anchored to this kind of employee lifecycle vision. So you may be somebody who operates in payroll, but that is what you do, but you're anchored to, at this stage in the employee experience, I help this person. Yeah. Be sure that they get paid and they understand their compensation. So that's a little bit how we brought those teams together. And it's interesting because both sides they think differently about similar things. But I found the commonality there was, how do you take the data that we have and distill it into something you can use? So not get lost in the volume, but just how do we start to elevate some headlines that can drive action?
Yeah.
And HR folks are good at that. They have a lot of data. And it turns out so are marketing people who are really oriented to qualitative and quantitative. So when you bring those things together, those things have been kind of happening in parallel. And this really created some collaboration so that there was lift for both. Marketing
Yeah.
got more credit as a business function, not expense. And HR, we're trying to reposition that function, not just to be super tactical, but to also be strategic. And so
Yeah.
kind of having a win-win there with that structure.
Yeah. Well, and it also, because it's such a new area, I mean, it's probably been around for almost 10 years, but the reality is a lot of people haven't really embraced it. So there's not a ton of people out there with specific experience around doing this. So did you have trouble recruiting, or were you really just very focused on recruiting within the individual areas, not really recruiting somebody specifically for employee experience?
That's what we were more focused just on the recruitment and just alignment of existing people around what is our vision and how do we execute this as a team. And it might look a little bit differently. We might be doing new or different things because our system has grown, it's evolved, and we have a different tech stack. So the things of everyday life are changing, but also how do we view the same work differently? So how do we put a different lens on things we've been doing to think with fresh perspective, and found that for some of the leadership roles that we did have naturally turnover during the last 2 years or so, that was kind of a differentiator for several candidates who were like, I like this holistic orientation to people, and this is really what I'm looking to be a part of. I'm excited about how you're thinking about or building this. And so that kind of structure or philosophy of the experience team also became kind of a recruitment tool as well.
Yeah. I know I saw some of this in action. So I know recruitment marketing in particular was one of the things that was high on your list, just in that environment, and hiring people fast and furious. Obviously, that's at the top of the list of business challenges. Was that something that you focused on, had a vision for in terms of how you were going to approach that? Like, how did you bring the marketing and the employee value proposition together on this recruitment marketing component? And I saw some of the numbers; they were fantastic.
Yeah, so we had great results, and that's a big question. Sure, we'll dive into some of that detail. Definitely had a vision, but also recognized it probably was going to take 2 or 3 years to actually get there. So in a world of like, we want results yesterday,
Yeah.
How do we create and communicate effectively? Like, here's what we've done, here's the impact, here's what's coming next. And so this kind of cascading and consistency compounding really led us to better results on the recruitment side. Like many other healthcare systems, just agency nurses specifically was a real pain point for us. We had a tremendous amount of vacancies, 1,000 plus full-time, part-time. At any one time, we had 20+% turnover, and we had a lot of agency expense, triple-digit millions of dollars. So it was a real business priority. It was also a cultural priority. It was also a quality priority. It drove all of those things. So we redesigned the recruitment team, and because we were a little bit of an entrepreneurial organization, we did not have a value proposition. We had this great brand work in the community, but then we had not yet developed, implemented, and operationalized as an employee or a provider. Why should I work here? Why should I stay here? And kind of that reciprocity of what's in it for me and what's in it for you. And so we really took advantage of that time to do the employee value proposition work, and to have our teams really lead that, and to help translate to business leaders. Like, this is what we're saying has to match what we're doing. Here are examples. And we started with the recruitment journey of here's how it starts to come to life. We are going to start having a compelling recruitment journey. We're going to be using that marketing team where it had an insights team that was a CRM, email marketing, and marketing automation experts. They then started to run the HR tech stack, since they already have the capabilities, kind of orientation and mindset. And so we started to kind of baby step into redesigning the web platform, using Workday, and in our case, Phenom as that tool, using email marketing, using AI chatbots, kind of just starting all of those things going. We started to turn those things on, and just organically just saw the candidates increase, in addition to what our recruiters, the human individuals, were doing in terms of targeted outreach.
Yeah. Yeah. Having participated in the acquisition journey of the Tulane hospitals, I saw firsthand there were other major initiatives that you guys were working on. And I thought that was and that was a lot of your brainchild, right? Like, how do we make this a journey for these people that are going to come into the organization? There's a large group of them. It's not just a, onboarding exercise for 20 people next week. It's an onboarding exercise for 2,500 people, just that whole process. And I saw the way that worked around this idea of the journey, and very baked into the value proposition. And really, it was a huge marketing initiative. I mean, I thought it was very powerful, and there was a lot of great feedback on that in terms of how people felt about that process.
No, I appreciate you saying that, because certainly there was a lot of sweat equity that went into planning, when people showed up, when they had that lived experience as a new employee joining our system, kind of the architect sitting behind it had taken all of this, our data research and our EVP to create these touch points that were some automated, some in person, but just continuous, consistent, and in that brand voice and that brand look, so that every step of the way people understood or aware, had clear communication, but it was done and developed and delivered in such a way that it felt celebratory, inclusive, and helped to give those new to our system employees an understanding of what their lived experience of our organization is and should look like, and what that culture is. So I think those are nice kind of on-ramp touch points, especially in an acquisition, so that ultimately your brand and your employee value proposition, like when employees show up to work every single day, they should be able to live it and feel it in their everyday life. And this is how we started to do that.
Yeah. Have you been able to translate that to just the regular onboarding process?
We are in the process of doing that. So that was kind of this was our pilot, which is great. So we kind of got to test and learn with those 2,000 plus employees and get some feedback and like, okay, this worked. We'd refine this. We're going to think about this differently. And now that's the work that's happening this year, which is looking at the entire system. Now that we have kind of that beta, which was wonderful.
Yeah.
And how do we bring that to life for in person, what needs to be in person? And then how do we use things like our Workday technology to automatically deploy and deliver some onboarding or some training things where you don't need to do it in person. You have to do it, but you don't necessarily have to have it done day one. What do we need to do and when? So that how do we create that experience as you join the organization? So we're re-recruiting you from the start, and you aren't, say, just showing up and sitting through 10 hours of the recitation of PowerPoint policies, which is not a moment of connection or community or culture.
Yeah. Yeah. Speaking of culture, I thought that was the other thing that I really loved, the way you guys organized around the brand culture with your culture leaders, or the crew, as you called them. That was a very powerful connection point for people getting communication, but also, these are people out in the field, right? They're not people sitting in the offices and the staff. They were people in the field who could welcome people at the local level. I thought that was really powerful.
Well, thank you. Yeah, that activation has really served us well. And I'll be honest, that came from our brand launch, 5 years ago, which is we had this KREW, the crew in New Orleans, that's kind of a parading crew. So we just took that vernacular and applied it, because we're, a city that likes to have fun and celebrate. So these feel like things to celebrate. And so we engaged people in that brand process, and we found people were excited. They wanted to be part of something. And it wasn't just people with different heads of titles. It was more like, who is a leader who really is excited and engaged, and kind of treating this as something that was a little something extra, that was kind of like a point of pride to be able to participate in. And you don't have to do it forever. So in that case, a lot of folks did for brand launch. It was amazing. And then we did kind of a 2.0 where people are kind of helping us sustain, and then acquisition, engaging different people. So it also helps us keep things fresh and keep it meaningful and alive for a lot of the organization.
Yeah. Yeah. That came in really handy in the change management work too, because you've already had people out in the field that kind of were the people who were, talking about things at the water cooler, right?
Exactly. Yeah. They can amplify that message. They can come back and be like, you put this up, but here are the 3 questions. I keep hearing it again and again. So they have different eyeballs and ears at that really grassroots level, that even just from a comm system-wide perspective, you're not walking the halls every day. So that's a great way for us to hear and see times a couple hundred.
Yeah. Were there some other big initiatives that you were working on behind the scenes, or that I didn't see? These were things that, I was witnessing, so I was excited about those, but I'm sure there were some other things going on that you guys were doing that we haven't talked about.
Yeah, that is a great question. I feel like there's always a lot happening behind the scenes. Then it comes out and people are like, oh, that's fantastic. Like, well, we've been working on that for 9 months.
Yeah.
Here it is. It's launching into the world.
Looks really easy when it comes out right on paper, but it's like, that took a lot of blood, sweat, and tears.
Yes, and a lot of kind of collaboration. So I'd say one thing that's bearing a lot of fruit that took us kind of consistently about 12 months to really have that on ramp and have it work well is what you're talking about, kind of that HR connection of, in our case, recruitment to fill our highest need. So how do we recruit nurses or allied health professionals? And that is about recruitment, but it's also about hiring managers and others who are receiving those candidates. It's looking holistically at this process and just being curious, because a lot of times if this is your job and you've done it for years, sometimes things become like wallpaper to you. And so we kind of took that fresh lens to say, okay, if I'm an applicant, like, what does this actually look like and feel like? And is it great? Is it good? Is it? And so just having that curiosity, a lot of our recruiters or others like, well, I don't know, I've never actually applied. It's like, let's do it. And so out of that kind of just let's map all these things came in a realization that the recruitment process was not awesome for our candidates. It really took a long time. It was hard. So the teams on the recruitment side, HR side, hiring managers side kind of redesigned all those processes. We kind of have some standard operating procedures on that side and some SLAs. And so those two things together are what we initially had to do before we even could talk about recruitment marketing. So it's like, we need to be sure that when you apply, it does not take 3 weeks for someone to get back to you. If you're a nurse, it should be like that day. It should be instantaneous. This is really our priority.
Yeah.
So we got that done, but really it's that recruitment marketing is kind of that always on invisible marketing. So for us, two things that really yielded a lot, even in the first 4 months, were our chatbot on our website, which does take a little bit of human finessing once you start to see those questions and themes. And then people just signing up for our community and then receiving email messaging from the organization. Again, we framed really creatively in that brand voice and value proposition. So it kind of broke through your email clutter. So there was always somebody, the virtual, LCMC Health recruiter was always sending you jobs, roles, updates. And so we started to see that funnel turn on and strong engagement. And so on the HR marketing and recruitment side, we could say, in our pilot in the first 4 months, just for roles that had vacancy positions, we saw applications and hires come out of that were the equivalent of, say, $250,000. And that was not totally set it and forget it, but kind of automate it and just tweak it. And so that's the work we started to pilot and scale that started to yield significant business results.
Yeah. I think,
but that took a while to get all of those things working together.
Yeah. And it's a perfect example of, what was the required business need so that you were focused on a business outcome, right? Getting people in the door, but also that balance between the business outcomes and the employee impact. And you really saw a lot of impact. I mean, that's where you start to see these decisions and these things start to make a difference when you start to see the impact at the employee level. I think that's critical.
Totally agree. And it's exciting to see because it's making a difference to the organization, to the individuals who are being hired, to everyone. It's just an accelerant of the mission and also people's careers.
Yeah. Well, and then they become ambassadors for the organization, right? And talk about their onboarding process and coming to work there. And it changes the whole dynamic of the way people think about their work.
Totally agree. And it's one of those things too, you can't, we keep kind of checking back in. And so sometimes it's surveys of folks who have recently been hired, it's touching base with those hiring managers. And we're starting to formalize a lot of those qualitative and quantitative data touch points to understand how are we doing and what are the strong or weak areas in this onboarding journey, and what do we really need to focus on so that people feel ready for day one, equipped and ready to just join the organization and feel excited about it.
Yeah. What were some of the learnings that you had, especially as somebody new to the HR function, right? That really wasn't your background. It was marketing. Did that I'd be curious to know if you had any learnings, and then did it have an impact on your approach to marketing going forward?
Oh, that's a good question. Yeah, I feel like I learned so much and I'm kind of curious. I feel like I'm a good student. I always have been. And so I didn't know what I didn't know on the HR side of things. And so I really asked a lot of questions and learned from so many people and the hundreds of people on that team. Came away with a lot of respect for the complexity of those roles and that function. And of course, just how essential it is. And so was always impressed with that. And I think for me, the thing that I also took away that I'm borrowed a little bit from marketing, brought to HR and vice versa in this case was, how do we elevate these things to have that seat at the table and to be a strategic mindset? Because people and FTEs are not things you move around in Excel spreadsheets to try and minimize the cost. So how do you start to think about people as your greatest asset, as your investment? You will see the human balance sheet side of things, you'll also see that reflected in the financials. So unless you change some of this holistically, or unless we respond to what employees and prospective employees are seeking, we're not going to be successful. So a lot of what we did was kind of borrowing that marketing mindset of let's seek to understand. And so we did a lot of nurse workforce research. We did a lot of research with applicants on the journey. We did a lot of cultural typography research with our entire workforce to say, what do you care about? Where are we doing? What are we doing well? And what are the gaps? And how do we start to elevate and ideate around that? And the themes there consistently were, I want you to invest in me as a professional and a person. I want to have access to internal mobility and growth in roles. And those were two key things that in our world we could do something about. And then it was a matter of sharing that, communicating it, and making that investment be truly an investment, not be perceived as an expense. So how do you start to think about the more and better you can support people and the easier you can make it for people to stay and grow? It's only is so mutually beneficial.
Yeah. Well, in the business case, I mean, for any of these things that you do is challenging, and even more so when it comes to, the impact, right? How do you show that? I mean, were there some specific metrics that you were looking at on a regular basis that you thought were powerful and impactful for your executives in the organization or your partners?
I think probably there was like the executive kind of focal point, and then more of the team detail, and the team detail one led to the outcome that people were looking for. So the outcome always was, how many people did we hire? How much money are we saving by not having agency for nurses, which has been our big priority. And so we had I'd say like a functioning, but not really robust recruitment function. And so we added sourcing, we added coordination. Previously, recruiters had kind of done it all, and that really wasn't working. So building the case of, we have to create this function to make it work. And if you spend this, you're going to get this. So we invested a little bit over $1 million in the course of a year. And then the impact to hiring was 130% increase in nurse hiring for those roles that had agency associated with them. And we have a range of like 13 to 16 million impact net on that. And part of the variation there is we were implementing Workday during that year. We had multiple financial accounting systems and some clarity at the beginning of the year that didn't give us that like perfect precision we're looking for, but that was something our finance folks could be comfortable with. So with that kind of investment, we saw that kind of return, and the best hiring we had ever had. And so building the case and just continuing to say, when we did this, we got this. If we do this, we can do this. So that was a big, both learning and a different way to demonstrate kind of how this people function can really deliver business results.
Yeah. No, it's a great story, and getting to witness some of that firsthand was, really it highlights what the value is, right? And I think that's probably imperative to some of these leadership teams is get in on the ground floor, like see what's going on, see what's happening, be part of the solution on this if you want to understand the impact that it's having on people in the organization.
Yeah, and it's hard to, it's that I have so much more respect now on the HR and talent side now that I learned it so well. It always comes back to, hey, we're not hiring well, or HR, you're not doing this fast enough. But wait, but there's also the interview process, hiring, like there are so many pieces here, but it kind of is like, this function kind of gets left holding responsibility and accountability for what is really a collaborative function. So our kind of the hill to die on for this whole team is like recruitment is really a team sport, and it's cross-functional and collaborative. So like we are all engaged in this, and kind of changing that, like we're all on the same team.
Yeah, it really is. And I think having support at the executive level is probably critical for making this happen, right? Because that's where the investment comes from. That's where people understand the cultural shift and can start to take on some of those attributes.
Yeah, kind of making people believers, and also that the saying of, if you want, don't keep trying to do the same thing expecting a different outcome. So like we're going to try some different things, and we're going to, because we need different outcomes.
Yeah. Well, this has been a great discussion. Is there anything you would leave the audience with today as they're thinking potentially about how they start to think about either the role of Chief Experience Officer, or really just working more closely between marketing and HR? Is there any guidance you would give them, or something that you might leave them with today that would be something to think about, ponder, get started on, that might help them?
No, that's a great question. I love that. And because there's so much variation, I would just say that you're always stronger together. And so the organization or the function, like there might be a lot of variation in all of those things, but there is only something to gain if you have this partnership between marketing and HR, where you can really unify who you are as an organization and what you stand for and how you bring it to life and that lived experience in the most meaningful way with your employees. Those two things working together are what make your organization different, distinct, in the place people want to be, people want to stay, and people want to work.
Yeah, no, I think that's key. Well, Christine, thank you so much for joining me today. This has been great. I also want to thank our producers, the Brand Method Media Group, and our marketing team who will get this podcast out to you. And thank you, the audience, for tuning in. That's all the time we have for this week's episode of HR We Have a Problem. If you enjoyed the episode, you can subscribe to it on your favorite podcast app. Leave us a review if you have a minute. We'd love to know what you're thinking, or if you have some topics that you'd like us to cover. And you can also drop us a line or schedule a chat on the website. We will be back in 2 weeks with another episode of HR We Have a Problem. Thanks, everybody.